Hello, welcome to the DragonCon Urban Fantasy Track, part of DragonCon Goes Virtual 2020. This evening we're discussing the other side, ghosts and spirits in urban fantasy. And I would like each of my panelists to introduce themselves, and then we'll get started on our discussion. We'll begin first with AJ.
Hi, I'm AJ Hartley. I write in multiple genres for kids, for adults, fantasy, sci-fi, mystery, and thriller. My most recent ghost series is what you can see over my shoulder, Cold Bath Street, which is a pair of Cold Bath Street and Runestone Lane, which is set in my hometown in Lancashire in 1978, and they're ghost stories.
Great, thank you. Walter.
Hi, I'm Walter Hunt. I'm a science fiction and alternate history and historical fiction writer. My most recent book is with Eric Flint. I got a 1632 book out, which I was looking forward to promoting in Atlanta, but of course I'm not. I've delved into a number of different genres, written hard science fiction, and most recently I've been writing a series set in the Victorian era about mesmerism, and elemental spirits make their appearance, along with the occasional blast from the past. So I'm looking forward to hearing as much as talking.
Great, thank you. Leanna.
Hello, my name is Leanna Renee Hieber, and I write Gothic gas lamp fantasy. So that's historical fantasy set in the gaslit era, so the late 19th century. And all of my books feature ghosts as some of the main characters. So this is definitely my favorite panel because it's literally what I've spent my entire career as a novelist doing, and also in other COVID times, in other times when we're allowed to be out in public. I am a New York City ghost tour guide. So in several ways, ghosts are a part of my everyday life.
And if I could insert something here, I do tend to, when we have in-person panels, I'm always jotting down things that people say, little quotes. And a few years ago on a panel, Leanna made the comment that she doesn't know how, she said, I don't know how to write a book without a ghost in it. So yes, definitely your panel, yes. Okay, Kat.
Hi, I'm Kat Scully. I am the writer and illustrator of the young adult horror series Jennifer Strange, which just came out. It's the first in a trilogy, and it's about a girl who can give ghosts and demons a body with a touch of her hand. And it's set in Savannah, Georgia, one of the most haunted cities in the South. And I'm really excited to talk about what I did to build the books, all the research I did, and just like everyone else here, I love talking about ghosts and folklore and everything. So I'm excited to be here.
Thank you. Well, for our first question, can you give us an idea, and by just kind of describing the different ghosts or spirits that you use in your fiction, like what are some of their characteristics? Do they have a special purpose? If you have a couple of different kinds, then of course, I'd like to hear that as well. And AJ, we'll start with you.
Okay, so the protagonist of Cold Bath Street and Rittenstone Lane is a kid called Preston Oldcorn, and he's 15, and he dies in the first chapter. It's a happy little book, so he's the protagonist. I know some of you have also written ghost protagonists, and I always wanted to write a ghost story from the perspective of the ghost. But then, of course, when you write a ghost story where your main character is a ghost, the question then becomes, well, how much worse can it get, right? How do I raise the stakes for the character? So the world of the story, it's set in, as I said before, it's set in my hometown, Preston, in Lancashire. And in the dead world in which he finds himself trapped, there are no people, and there's no time. Everything is sort of frozen in the moment that he dies. And then he starts to discover that there are other ghosts. And some of them are dangerous and scary. And the one of the core ideas of the books is, you know, as I say, how much worse can it get? What can happen to a ghost? And so as far as differentiating types, I have my main character who's very much an adolescent kid who's trying to figure out what it means to be dead, what he can and cannot do, where he can go and where he can't go. And then there are these other things, some of which are much, much older, that are out there in the town. And they all came out of the sort of the mythology and folk culture that I grew up with. And specifically local ghost stories. And some of them are ghosts who are somehow trapped. They may not even realize exactly that they're dead. And some of them are much older and much more malevolent and capable of doing terrible things to living people and also to dead people.
Oh, it does sound like a happy little book, just the way you said yes. Walter.
Well, I haven't done too much with actual ghosts, although my first science fiction series featured a number of dead characters who actually got dialogue. And the aliens have a bunch of ways of addressing people, and they have a matching set of addresses for dead characters, for dead people. In the current series, the elemental spirits are the ones that take center stage, and they exist in a realm which is not unlike what AJ was describing. They are behind what's called the glass door, where they were banished thousands of years ago. And there are 4 different elemental types: photic, chthonic, nereic, and the other one.
And number 4, yeah.
Pneumic, of course, the four Greek elements. And their interaction with the real world is such that they don't completely understand how we work. They don't have the same notion of time. They don't have the same notion of sequential action. And so they can be different places at different times. And in some ways, they are very much from, as the panel describes, the other side. Making sure that they are suitably alien is probably the biggest thing. And setting it in the 19th century, which I know that makes Leanna smile. There she's smiling. Makes it even more mysterious, because the 19th century was full of all kinds of fake and perceived science. I work with mesmerism, which is a completely fraudulent form of manipulation, except in this series it actually works. And that goes over into spiritualism and over into phrenology, which is the study of the bumps of the head, and goes into all kinds of different weird science. As a result, you get the impression that there's a whole world you can't see, except some people can actually see it. And that leads to all kinds of interesting consequences.
Okay. Leanna.
Okay, so much like has been described, for me there's a range as well. And the range of types of ghosts tend for me to fall along the lines of positive or negative energies. So sometimes a space is haunted, and so the residue of either something positive or something negative will be there. And of course I have ghosts as characters. So haunting for me is both a space and an area. It's sometimes site specific as well as character specific. And I have many protagonists who are dealing with the dead, and the dead are helping them. So in most of my books, whether it's my first series, the Strangely Beautiful series, where we have a haunted young woman who is she's thought to be a ghost as often as she's thought to be a human, because she has albinism, and so she is the pallor of ghosts in that world as well. And so she is in this very liminal space between the living and the dead. And that goes for the character of my most recent series, my Spectral City series. So my latest series, I'm starting with the Spectral City. In this series, it's set in 1899 Manhattan. And it has a young psychic medium at the forefront. Her and her young female psychic colleagues are members of the Ghost Precinct. They work for sort of a secret branch of the NYPD in 1899 to solve weird crime that has gone unsolved and very unregarded by other segments of the police force. So generally speaking, people who are underclass, folks who haven't gotten resolution, children, women's narratives. So things that are also falling into the realm of the unexplained. So they, along with their favorite friendly ghosts, who have decided to stay on as members of the ghost precinct. So these are sort of operatives that have decided as full consciousness spirits. So that's a term that I utilize to explain that these are spirits that are potent enough to be present, to be manifest, so that you can see them visually in grayscale and have a full conversation. Some ghosts are not full consciousness spirits. Some ghosts are just echoes of a moment, of a sad moment. And that's sort of like a psychic impression. That's sort of a psychic imprint on a space, or that echo left over. We talk about that a lot also as a ghost tour guide, because of course there's different types of hauntings that you find in haunted spaces, whether you believe or not. There's all these different kinds of tales of what sort of spectral activity you're going to get. So I use a whole range of spectral activity, from poltergeists to possessions. I have exorcists in the mix. I have a diverse range of characters, and all of them come with different traditions, cultural traditions, belief traditions, skeptics, believers, all of the mix. And much like with Walter's series, the great thing about this late 19th century is that there's so much of this science and pseudoscience, and it's all blending, and there was so much room to play in. My characters are legitimate spiritualists, but they're very aware that most of the people who are out there taking, you know, marquee stage shows around are total frauds. They're very aware of that. They're actually letting that be sort of a cover. They almost work with the disbelief and interest of the time. The interest of the time allows them to have latitude and movement. The disbelief of the time, and a lot of them being found out as frauds, allow for them to work sort of behind the scenes, and they get to decide, you know, the characters and the people they work with get to decide whether this is real or not. Of course, for them,
same here. My mesmerists are they're sort of underground because they've been debunked, except their powers actually work. I mean,
exactly.
Yeah, the whole idea of skepticism and belief is so mixed up prior to the 20th century that there's so much to work with, as obviously.
Absolutely,
You know.
absolutely, and the characters can play with that about whether the belief or the reality or the skepticism and denial, whether it works for them or doesn't, and they can play with that. They're aware of the fact that half the populace is going to be absolutely on board and half the populace isn't. And so they can use that to their leverage. And also at that time too, because a lot of my main characters, they're women, many of them are, they also have an additional layer of not being believed in society and also not necessarily having rights in society. So you have this other thing that becomes an additional metaphor for a lot of my outcast characters, my marginalized characters from all different walks of life that are using the paranormal as agency in a way that they wouldn't have it otherwise.
Very good. And Kat?
So I've got a similar answer to AJ. Mine's a happy book. It's really, it's very bloody. So my ghosts operate a lot like what Leanna was describing, in that I built a system I decided that was going to border my favorite genres between fantasy and horror, where Jennifer's powers were going to really be in the realm of dark magic, what she can do. But my ghosts and my demons are very real. They are monsters, and the things that she deals with get bloody. So I was thinking through this entire system of, okay, what happens when you die? And I didn't want to go into angels versus demons. I wanted to do just what you believe is how you die. Like if you believe nothing happens, you go to a land that's just skeletons and dust and it's nothing. And if you go into the light, you go to the land of the restful dead. And if you like have newly died, you get to kind of be in a gray space deciding where you want to go. And so Savannah is filled with all these different types and different states of if they're cycling on or if they're stuck there. And if they can't get unstuck, if they can't stop living their despair, they become demons. So every entity Jennifer encounters was once human. And the problem is demons being so far gone, like all they remember is wanting to get back and wanting to be alive. So they're very instinctual and they're very hungry. And the only way they can get back, being so gone, is to possess the living. And Jennifer, her power being that she can give them a brand new body. They don't even need like a host, anything. If she just touches a ghost or demon or someone possessed, like by a demon, she can give them a body. And so they're all hungry for her power, every demon, every ghost in Savannah. And so when her father drops her there, just as her powers are awakened, she has to figure out why they're all after her, how to stop them, with her older sister who was just going to college. And there are ghosts who aren't as violent, who just want to pass on. And Jennifer's older sister has the power of banishment. She can dispel spirits. So she's able to help them cross over. But Jennifer, being terrified, being short-tempered, has to find a way to get the patience to hear out what a spirit wants instead of just giving it a body when it may just want to move on. And so her struggle in the first book is figuring that out, as well as the fact that her family on her dad's side came from a long line of ghost hunters. She has these powers because her mother was a demon. And so they committed the ultimate sin by creating children at all. And these rival families are on both sides of whether these demon children, Jennifer and her older sister Liz, should be allowed to exist. And
Oh, lovely.
can they be
This is the happy
benefit, or can they like be good or bad? So I had a lot of fun playing with that, and like Jennifer's inner struggle, and it's all from her perspective. So it's a limited instead of third person, it's first person. And it's just going through her moment to moment of like, the guy in her class got possessed and he's telling her, I want a body. I want you to give me a body. She's like, what are you talking about? Like, you're a human. And he attacks her. She actually touches him. And then the wraith rips him apart. And that's at the beginning. So it's both things. It's fantasy and horror, but at the same time, the ghosts still play on that same idea of what Leanna was talking about before, that ghosts are people that are trying to figure out what to do, whether to move on, whether they want to be there or what they want. And sometimes they can move past it and sometimes they can't. And Jennifer, being a younger YA bug instead of an older 17-year-old, she's 15, can't drive a car. She's still trying to figure things out. She's just moving into being able to figure things out on her own. So it does become a really great metaphor for like anxiety, fighting anxiety, and learning to be more patient and hear things out.
Which isn't always easy when you're a teenager.
Oh.
Yeah.
No.
So now, so I know that at least two of you, that AJ and Leanna, have ghosts or spirits that serve as main characters or as the protagonist of the story. But do Walter and Kat, do you have any that serve as, like, that they have a role to play, not just to come and go off the page kind of thing? Do you have any?
Oh my goodness.
If you do, what I'd like to hear is, what are the challenges, and this is for all of you, is what are the challenges from a narrative standpoint of, creating a character that is either a ghost or a spirit, and, telling the story, telling their story. And Walter, we'll start with you this time.
Okay, thank you. Well, the elemental spirits, the stoicheia, as they're called, which is a Greek word meaning elemental spirits, they are not human, though they take human form. In the first book, in Elements of Mind, which I'll show here, one of the principal characters is possessed by an elemental spirit. She's in India, and she finds her way home as the wife of this Dr. James Esdale, who's a real person. And she takes over this woman's body. But the woman realizes that she can watch as long as she doesn't object to all the things that she sees. And she has 7.5 years where she's possessed by this being, this fee, who takes control of her, but who doesn't know how to be human, and has to learn from her. And that's the deal they make. She'll show her how to act out the part, as long as she isn't completely shut away, because she realizes that the spirit can shut her away at any time. So we see how the spirit sees the world, and it's told retrospectively. although that spirit and other spirits appear at various times in the story, but we get to see them as with agency, and they can be a little scary because they don't think like humans and they don't have the sort of morality or the sort of restraint, and as a result, they'll do stuff that you would not want any of your principal characters to do, but they do it anyway. And what they want most of all is to open the glass door and get back to humanity, get back to doing the things they do, to asking what you want and then doing it for you for a price, which is very demonic.
Oh, yeah. Leanna.
So for me, the challenges are that ghosts are really helpful. And one of the reasons why partly I sort of playfully say, but it's very true, I don't really know how to write a book without a ghost in it, is because so much of my world building is wrapped around the ability for ghosts to bring information. In a time without, cell phones and without the internet, ghosts are really quick. They've got, they're high speed information to bring you specific pieces that you might need. However, I love the Gothic trope of the unreliable narrator. So I definitely play on the idea that ghosts are not on the same timeline as we are. Of course, they're sort of eternal. They're, much like when you really start to forget sort of what day it is as a human, imagine that's every day as a ghost. So their concept of time and immediacy is not at all what ours is. And they also have different priorities. Some of them might be fixated on something, on justice specifically, and they don't necessarily know how to let go of that. A couple of my favorite characters in my Spectral City series, and then this is the latest, A Summoning of Souls, and it just came out just the same day as Jennifer Strange did. It was a most auspicious day to share that with Kat. So with this series, I have a young ghost named Zofia, and she's a Polish immigrant. She's a young girl who died in a garment district fire, and her and another ghost, Olga, a Ukrainian immigrant too, died in the same garment district fire. And they're sort of these sisters as ghosts who try to stay on and help the living, specifically anyone who is helpless or trapped. If there's a fire, they will point the way out to disoriented living people. And then they've decided to join with the Ghost Precinct as operatives because they see that is a way that they can again affect a great amount of help in a system with these other psychic mediums and draw attention to the plight of workers' rights, of women's and children's rights, which again, we're still being kind of codified in the 19th century. So their purpose driven sometimes makes them very focused on one thing, and they're not necessarily always focused on the thing that my main characters always need them to be on. So it's fun when I'm writing scenes from Maggie Haythorne's perspective. She's probably my star ghost in the Spectral City series, because she's been with me since my young adult series. She was the mean girl. She was the really nasty mean girl to my heroine in Darker Still and my Magic Most Foul saga. She, at the end of that trilogy, spoilers, sacrifices her life for her friends, and sort of in that she has a redemptive arc. So she continues on as a ghost and then helps those characters' daughter, Eve, in her Ghost Precinct. So I have a real fun sort of redemptive arc for her, but she's still this slightly snotty socialite who's still kind of an eternal mean girl, but now like she's at least using it for good. So she very much has a specific idea of how she wants things to be done, and so she just has her own rules, and it's very hard to be, for Eve as the sort of the precinct director to tell this ghost that there are certain things she can and can't do. She just goes and possesses someone in this last book without any protocol, without letting her manager know that she's going to go possess a guy. And there's this whole, this whole thing ensues. She possesses an exorcist because she thinks, well, that's a great idea, because then if it goes wrong, you can just get me out, because they're an exorcist.
You can get her out of himself.
For me, it's a lot of fun of like, okay, I have to have the constraints of these not being corporeal beings. So I get a lot of fun, things about hands going through objects and poking things and all the various fun things that you can do with a ghost who is trying to like cause trouble in a fun way or in a way that's trying to get people's attention. So I definitely have to, though, make sure that I don't make my ghosts omniscient characters that know everything. The way I sort of solve from this being too convenient is that I give them limited amounts of information and make sure that their ability to manifest is somehow usually constrained by other atmospheric conditions. In this case, by a gentleman who's figured out how to electrically kill them again as ghosts. So that's, they're fighting a new fight with the newfangled contraptions of electricity.
Oh, geez. Okay, Kat.
So this will be a bit of a spoiler if you haven't read Jennifer Strange book 1, but I do have a major ghost character in book 2, and it's interesting because I just have to hint that a certain character dies and it angers Jennifer's side of the family, and the head of her family wants her dead, and she comes to find out the head is a ghost. So she's like, this is so horrible, because this ghost who refuses to let go of my family and like run the strange ghost hunters is himself a ghost who just won't let anyone else run things. He just can't let go. They don't even know how old he is. He's been around so long. And on the other side, there's 2 warring ghost hunter families. The other is the Blackwells, and they actually swap and train each other's children, like as an apprenticeship.
Oh, jeez.
Yes. So the other side, the Blackwells, prolong their lives by eating ghosts. So they have trapped, through the ages, sparrows to collect ghosts and demons for them, which they then eat. So it's this family saga that goes on for a long time, but most of the characters are people. But I have the rule where all of my ghosts are exactly where they're supposed to be, unless their desire is so great they're able to leave where they died or where they haunt. And in the first book, the Banshee is the only one able to leave where she is. It's not a demon, and it's because she's this grieving mother of a character who died, that Jennifer created by killing them. So she becomes this major character that tries to get Liz and take her, and that angers Jennifer, so she turns her human. And I think the struggle that I had was writing these characters is that, doing that unreliable narrator can be difficult to write, especially with spirits, because you just sort of think they just want one thing, they're not going to be complex. And the Banshee was the most complex character to write. She's basically still human. She still has the same emotions. And with Cornelius, he can't leave his house. The head of the Strange family, he can't leave. So that was difficult to write when I had a larger cast. The cast triples in size in the second book. And so creating the scenarios where Jennifer would be the one proactively going to the house. I took a lot of thought, a lot of processing, like, okay, if I'm making this rule that spirits can't really go anywhere else, how do I get her there? And why is she there? And what does she overhear at what time? And I also like the idea of just playing with spirits and like, how much humanity have they lost? How far gone are they? Like, how close is Cornelius, for example, to becoming a demon himself because he just can't stop? And those are really interesting to just play around with. Like, for me, everything with ghosts is all about personal motive. It's all about what they want, what they don't want, and how much distance is for them to get there. So there wasn't much difference between writing any of my normal characters and writing my spirits, because I mean, really the difference is death and also obsession. Like, how far gone are they in their obsessions and their wants?
I like the idea that you and Leanna have both said, all right, we're going to establish rules, and then I have to stick to the rules that I've written for myself, because it's so easy to make them anything goes. Then it becomes, Doctor Who, right? It becomes, well, sorry. No, I mean, you have to, by establishing rules, you force yourself to a certain discipline of narrative, which I think is very valuable and very, and it informs a great deal about how you go about designing the book. And I like that. I think that's commendable.
Cool. And AJ?
points of overlap with things that other people have said, so I'm trying to think of a way to answer the question differently. And for me, the interesting things about the ghosts, it's an intersection of identity and temporality, in that the way that the logic of the ghost world works is that because they're each trapped in the moment of their own death, they have no perception of time. They don't know how long they've been gone. And in my stories, they can only go to places that they went to in life. And the longer they stay dead, the more they forget. And that limits the world until they gradually become a kind of abstraction of some aspect of themselves as they shed other elements of their psychology, all the complexity that we were just talking about, that gradually falls away as they become more and more associated with a particular place, a particular idea. And for me, I said that these stories were written, set in my hometown in the late 70s when I was an adolescent. And that was very deliberate, because the books that I'd written, the YA books I had just finished writing with the Steeplejack series, which was set in a world that looked like a kind of gaslit Victorian South Africa, and the protagonist was a brown-skinned 17-year-old girl, which I am not. And so I thought, this time I wanted to write a book that grew very much out of my own experience. And I had found that when I go back to my hometown, because obviously I don't live in the UK anymore, I haven't lived there for 35 years, and the town is not the way I remember it, and things are not quite where, and what I'm trying to say is I started to realize that I was the ghost.
Interesting.
Sort of moved, the town continued to grow while I was trapped in a version of my own past. And so when I would go back, I would find myself curiously out of that world, and only able to talk to people and connect to things that had happened 40 years ago or whatever,
It's very Bradbury-esque.
Yeah. So I wanted to build that into the way the story worked, and I make light of it, but in the end, these are very much stories about loss and isolation, and trying to hold on to a version of yourself, while you gradually sort of shed everything that you were.
Wow. Well, and to go back to your first point, though, I know in the beginning of the book, when Preston first comes across Roar, is that how, whatever, that's how you pronounce his name. He tries to climb the wall of the cemetery, but he can't because he never did it when he was alive. So he doesn't have the ability to do it as a ghost. And I thought, well, that's very clever. I had never really thought about that. So the
difficulty is, I think that what's hard is then when you've got ghosts who are all alive in different periods, it means that everything that they see and experience is going to be different, right? So when you have those ghosts interacting, they're not really interacting in the same space. They're in spaces that are defined by their own memories. And so, the sort of narrative difficulties become about finding enough common ground that they can actually have some sort of relationship or connection, without breaking the rules that we've just been talking about.
Right. Well, in your stories, are ghosts or spirits, are they visible to everybody, or can just certain people see them, or can anyone see them? And Leanna, we'll start with you this time.
For me, it's a mix of people who can and people who cannot. So I definitely play with the fact that my characters tend to believe that everyone has the capacity to see spirits if they want to. Just some folks don't necessarily. I try to keep belief structures really open. I try to keep the capacity for everyone to have a little bit of a psychic capability to be very open. My characters basically are just at a very extreme hypersensitive level, but they'd be the first person to say, like I do, I think that all of us as human beings have the capability of a little sensitivity, of energy sensitivity, and thinking about, like, if someone comes into a room and they're in a terrible mood, you can just feel it without even necessarily seeing it. So, like, I do feel like we are all, as a human species, a little bit energy sensitive. So I try to sort of, you know, keep it very open. And my characters are very good at judging who can and can't see spirits, because they'll watch where the spirit is, and then they'll see if anybody else is paying attention. They'll see if anyone else is shivering. They'll see if anybody else is reacting, and then they will act accordingly to if someone else is interacting. So they're very much always on intake. A lot of my characters they either are detectives or they have sort of a detective mindset. They'll wait for the data, and then they will act accordingly depending on the data that they're getting. And again, if they're in a situation where they will be believed, they might tell the truth. If they're in a place where they will not be believed, they just won't even bother saying that. They'll make something else up. Now, when the ghost really wants to be seen, then the ghost might swat something into the room, and then suddenly there's something else to explain. But I definitely feel that it's fun to play with the possibility that at any moment someone else could have a capacity to be interacting with this thing that you might think is private, or that you might think is only relating to my characters. So I think and I think that that's the case too in our modern world. Some people are going to believe what you're going to say, some people are going to like your books, and some people aren't going to like your books. You know, I think I feel like there's a lot of like parallels. You know, ghosts are completely metaphor anyway, and yes, they're real in my books, but they also serve, as they do for all of us. There's been so many wonderful layers of the metaphor as to how that applies to the living, and that my characters would be the first one to say that ghosts are the ones that are teaching them about life, how to live in the moment too, and seeing in a different way. And so, you know, the different ways in which those perceptions change depending on the circumstance is just something that's really, really been fun for me to toy with. Again, entirely depending on the circumstance.
All right. Kat?
So in my book, I've got ghosts and demons. So with ghosts, they will show themselves when they want to, if they want to.
Oh, so it's up to them, in other words. It doesn't necessarily have to do with the ability of the other people. Okay.
And
Interesting.
since demons can't cross over, they can only possess someone. That's the only way you can tell. So when Jennifer first sees a demon, it possesses her classmate, and she sees his mouth drip blood. So she's like, yeah, but no one else sees that. The demon only wants her to see it. So the demons like to mess with her. They love to mess with people, like at a whole other level than ghosts. So I wanted them to function in different rules. And the biggest thing isn't what if people can see the ghosts or see the demons. It's actually the fact that every time Jennifer gives them a body, part of her body is taken, because all magic has a cost. So I function off of like a hermetic principle, like as above, so below, as within, so without, as the universe, so the soul. And each of the 3 books is each of the 3 rules. So like if you buy the hardback, this is the hidden message on the inside of the hardback. And I'm going to do that with each of the books. I'm excited. But no one can see this mark but Jennifer. Nobody knows she's being eaten slowly by her mark because she gave a demon a body. And her sister can't see it, which freaks her out. And she goes, I can't tell my sister what's happening to me. Which they were already estranged, so that just pushes them further apart. But I like the idea of what can be seen and what can't, because like that's such a big thing with ghosts, is like, what amount can you see, what can't you? And I felt like as a writer, there was so much room to play with those rules of like what people could see, what they couldn't. It was just about making them consistent so that it wasn't confusing, because like Leanna mentioned earlier, I love the unreliable narrator. And throughout the first book, it's half journal. And the journal is from Jennifer's father. And she tells Jennifer that only demons can possess, but the banshee later does possess someone, and she's like, my dad lied to me. Like, ghosts, more powerful ghosts, can possess someone. So it was also like, what can be seen and not be seen about the rules of ghosts to my characters that I felt was important.
Okay, cool. Thank you. AJ.
Yeah, for me, it's not like there's a bunch of, invisible spirits floating around in our conventional reality, and so we can either see them or we can't. For me, the gap is a temporal one, right? So for the ghost to manifest, it has to somehow lean into the present. It has to sort of push through whatever distance in time there is, which requires a certain amount of effort and skill on the part of the ghost. Now, there are people who, in living people who in my story are a little more sensitive, to use the phrase that was used earlier. But more often than not, the actual manifestation is about the will of the ghost rather than the person who happens to see them. I have a moment when one woman and this girl who's trying to research have parallel narratives. One of them is about the ghosts and one of them is about living people who encounter them. And there's a girl who's trying to figure out what's going on, and she goes to speak to this woman who has seen the ghost to get the story from her. And at the end of the conversation, she says, are you a medium? And the woman, this is my favorite Lancashire phrase, the woman says, no, love, I've always been a large.
You'll be here all week trying to be there.
But the point is that, as I say, it's mostly not about the people who are on the receiving end of the ghost experience. It's more about this other attempt from the other world to somehow reach out. And part of the idea in my story also is that the ghosts believe they will last longer if people remember them. So again, it's about loss and separation and diminishing in the minds of the living. And so some of the scary ghosts think that this is the way that they retain a foothold on reality, is by reminding people that they're there and they're dangerous.
And look at me, I existed, yeah. And I still do in some form.
Yeah.
Walter.
Well, again, to refer to the mesmerism series, the elemental spirits have motive power because they have come into the world. They've gotten past the glass door, and that usually means they've been asked to be here. There's a particular bête noire of the principal character who calls himself the Levantine, and he's this dapper Middle Eastern fellow. He's from Lebanon, or he looks like he's from Lebanon. He's perfectly dressed. His teeth are perfect, which is strange for the 19th century. Right. And he looks like an average person to anyone else, except that because particularly the Chthonios, the earth spirits, have been exiled to the poles, they're cold, and every place when they come through, there's a chill. So somebody will feel a chill, but not know that there's a spirit here. It's just a person, and somebody left the door open, so there's a chill. So their manifestation to people who do not have the sensitivity to see is something mundane, which may or may not have an explanation readily available. But those who are sensitive to it can tell what they're looking at. They know a stoicheia, they know an elemental spirit when they see one. In the middle of the book, spoiler, William Davy goes to Malta, and in Malta he goes to he discovers that it's the anti-magnetic island. There was an idea that there was a magnetic island floating up near the poles that was supposedly seen by an Arctic expedition in the 1820s. True story. So he goes to Malta and finds that it's the anti-magnetic island, and in a cave he deals with some elemental spirits that are way more powerful, and they don't get him at all, and they say, you're here because we allowed you to get here. You don't want us to take action, because if you do let us take action, it will be really bad. And he realizes that he's dealing with things that he cannot deal with. They're way more powerful than he is, but he knows what they are. But anybody else who stumbled into that cave would simply feel a draft or feel a sense of dread or feel whatever it is that they feel. So spirits that are able to manifest in the world give off a vibe, but most people dismiss it as something other than something supernatural. And that leads to interesting consequences.
Okay. Now, this was several years ago, one of the first years of the urban fantasy track when Amber Benson was on my ghost panel that I did. One of the comments she made was that they are not the end. Ghosts are just what comes next. And so my question for each of you is, do yours move on? Is there, is that the ultimate goal for them, is to actually move on to wherever else that might be? And Kat, we'll start with you.
So I think for some of them who want to move on, that's the ultimate goal. Some of them just want to rest and not be bothered anymore. Some just want there to be nothing, and some want to go back to living and they don't want to move on. It doesn't matter. They had more to do. And I think in the course of the series, there's going to be more complications of that, along with Jennifer's growing demonic powers. And I think that most of the ghosts do want to move on in my stories, and the demons don't. The demons were all the ghosts that couldn't move past being spirits, couldn't move past the fact they died. But all the ghosts that Jennifer will encounter and do encounter in the first book definitely just want a peaceful ending and like some sort of resolution with their families. Usually it's never about like they want something material. It's always about wanting something with their family, some sort of closure with someone they loved, or something they felt they left unsaid. And I think as Jennifer goes through and meets, I have a cast that I've called the Dark Zodiac. It's half ghosts, half demons. And there are 3 gates. I'm trying to be as non-spoiler as possible, but there are 3 gates that are going to come up. The first one, the Black Gates in the first book, and it's been prophesized that 2 sparrows will open it, and it leads to the land where if you die and you think there's nothing after you die, that's where you go. So I tried to make where there's a space for everybody, and I actually got that inspiration from What Dreams May Come, how everyone in What Dreams May Come gets the ending that they want. And I was like, what if I took that and applied it to ghosts, which I hadn't really seen done before, but it honestly really aligns with everything that I've learned about ghosts while I was studying them, both real and fake. And I just went through a rabbit hole. I researched the Warrens. And, my largest inspiration was the Warrens, because I was like, what if I wrote a book series that was about, are they real or are they fake? The Warrens. What if I had 2 families that represented that? So
the Warrens?
Yeah, Ed and Lorraine Warren, Amityville Horror,
okay, those guys.
Haunting, those guys, yes.
You say Warren around here. I think Joseph Warren and John Warren.
Oh yeah, right, exactly.
They were prominent Freemasons.
Right, exactly. So yeah, Ed and Lorraine Warren, and I was just very interested in, are they real or are they not? And then sort of applying that to 2 different sides of that argument in a book series. But yeah, I think that honestly, it's like I said, I wanted to take the idea of Where Dreams May Come. What do you want when you die? And how are you going to get it or not get it? It's just like, that's basically the same as living. You're just in a different state, like different limitations, like,
so similar goals.
Similar goals. Yes, exactly.
Okay. Thank you. AJ.
So, all my ghosts are in a kind of no place. And there is potentially at least something that they can move on to. But the books are very deliberately unclear about what that next step is, and whether it's the same for everybody, or whether it's affected by their belief systems or what, we don't know. And that's part of the terror, I think, of being a ghost, because it is quite possible that moving on means ceasing to exist at all in these stories. So, and you know, my protagonist is raised as a Catholic, and is trying to sort of reconcile his ghost status with the things that he was taught, and he doesn't know if those things kick in when he stops being a ghost or what. And yeah, I didn't want to sort of start saying this is what happens when you die, because I don't know what happens when we die.
Right. Right.
And so, you know, and because the books are rooted in a very, very real world and a very real place, I wanted to steer clear of too much speculation.
Yeah, and it's not as though 14-year-old boys don't have issues with identity already, right? So I mean, poor Preston. Okay, Walter.
Well, of course, I have a different perspective because my spirits are not dead, but they're not alive either. And they generally do not come to any particular end. Though in the second book, in the one that's set in Paris, one of the threats is you know, telling a chthonic spirit, an elemental spirit, I will make you lose contact with the earth. They actually can be destroyed. And the thing they probably most fear is the idea of non-existence. That they've worked so hard to get to the point where they exist that they fear non-existence. So they're risk averse unless they're substantially more powerful. And there is a sort of a ladder hierarchy of who's more powerful than who else. So you got to watch out for the ones that don't fear, that aren't afraid of death, that aren't afraid of walking through Père Lachaise, even though it hurts them, because they know that they're bigger than that they can't be stopped easily. So that's their perspective. They don't think of themselves as mortal, but they understand that there are things that can hurt them. But the more powerful they are, the less afraid they are that something can actually follow through and do it to them. And certainly not these petty mortals.
Certainly not.
There to tempt and to serve and control.
Thank you. Leanna.
So, again, it sort of depends per series which what sort of the ghost goal is, because it really is relative to the rest of my main characters and what they can kind of bring about. In my Strangely Beautiful series with Persephone Parker, she is kind of between the living and the dead, and she is a beacon of light, truly, for the dead and those who want to pass on. And much like my friends here, I am also leaving that very open as to what that great beyond, what the sweet summerland is, what that the spiritualists speak of, is like something that my ghosts who have chosen to stay on, they don't yet know, and they can only have a sense of it. And I do definitely respect different belief structures, and sort of to each their own. And what my, you know, Jewish hero in the Spectral City series sees when he glimpses this between space called the Sanctuary of Spirit. So in my second book, I have a sanctuary that's a safe haven for ghosts, that's between life and death, that's literally a place to recharge, and you can get back to the earth again and the mortal world and sort of rest up, because manifesting as a ghost does take energy, and energy is finite. So that's a place where if you do not want to move on to whatever that next step is, that sanctuary is a place where you can sort of recharge to go back to what your mission. So it's very purpose driven. My ghosts they're there to, if they're very connected to the living, then their purpose connected to the living makes them much more powerful ghosts. They're much more able to manifest. They have a lot more energy because of how tied they are to a living goal. So the purposes and the purpose driven nature of the ghost depends on how connected they are to my main characters. So Percy Parker is like a a light where moths who want to pass on will go to that flame because they know she can set them to rest. So that's one of her powers, and that's one of her capacities. So we see that happen more in Strangely Beautiful than we do, say, in Spectral City, where my heroine is a medium, and it's about information and it's about solving mysteries. So the purpose for the people interacting with Eve is Eve cannot set spirits to rest. So that's, you know, their spirit's going to be out of luck if they want that from her. So those who really,
purpose, though.
What's that?
Oh, I'm sorry. I said she gives them a purpose.
It gives them a purpose, and that does make them more vibrant as spirits. Now, if I do deal in my Magic Most Foul series and in my Eternophiles series, so Magic Most Foul is young adult, Eternophiles is regular adult Gaslamp fantasy. In those two series, I do go ahead and deal with demons as the consequence of what happens to a human spirit when they lose all humanity. So if you are a spirit that continues to decay into misery and violence and negativity towards evil, then you will lose any capacity of humanity, and that births a demon. So those demons are just black silhouettes, like lightless silhouettes that are literally a black hole of despair. And so those are forces that are not sentient anymore. They don't get to be conversational. Those are just leeches of human energy, and those can be weaponized by evil mortals,
Right,
but them become that evil silhouette. You do not have a consciousness anymore of your own. So there is sort of still a range of that. And so there's a hunger, of course, in that darkness for more darkness, but they're not aware of that in the same way. They're not sentient of that in the same way that my other ghosts that are in those between spaces are.
Well, I got to tell you, while you were giving that that last piece about the demon, the demon, I guess, not the forms, but those spirits. Kat is up there with this great big grin on her face, like she was she was way into it. Well, now we're almost out of time, but I would like for my last question, and I would like for you guys to tell me what is one of your favorite scary ghost stories? And you don't have to tell us the story. We don't want to do that. We just want to tell our viewers what's something that they should pick up and read if they've never read it before. AJ, we'll start with you. Oh, okay. You don't want me to start with you? Can anybody think of one off the top of their head then?
There's a couple of great ones in the Martian Chronicles.
Okay.
Archer 2 comes to mind. That's a particularly disturbing story. Bradbury has a way of weaving the familiar with the unearthly that is admirable, and that's why he was one of my favorite writers. I get to meet him exactly once, but very late in his life. But his insight into what is truly disturbing, without stepping into the horror or into the graphic, there are a number of them, and as I say, Martian Chronicles is probably the best. There's an example of a story where some Martian being takes the form of whatever people are most longing to see, and eventually can't keep up and is destroyed because it can't be all things to all people. And that's a very mundane idea, but it's told in a very, very disturbing way. So I'd go with Bradbury. You can't go wrong with Bradbury.
Hey, AJ, you got one yet?
Yeah. Now I'm muted. Sorry. Yeah, I was going to say Heart-Shaped Box, Joe Hill, which is one of those rare things that actually gave me nightmares. And it's very understated a lot of the time. It's not a dramatic kind of spectral presence that especially at the beginning of the book. It's just deeply creepy. And then there's a series of Japanese folk tales about wronged women who come back as ghosts, and you see them. They show up a lot in ukiyo-e, kabuki style plays, but also in woodblock prints and things of these these ghosts that come by to terrorize people. And again, it's that idea that they, whatever they were, has been driven out of them by their own sort of trauma, and then now there's a level of malice that is completely irrational. And these things manifest themselves in modern Japanese mythology, like The Grudge and The Ring and those kind of stories. I think are really, really powerful.
Okay, thank you. Leanna, I know you've got one.
Okay. A dear friend of the track, Sherry Priest, The Family Plot.
Ah, okay.
Okay, so
Sherry, whom we missed, yes.
Sherry has real life ghost stories that still terrify me just thinking about, that she has said on panels. And I know that some of her real experiences have gone into that book in particular. The Toll is another one of hers that's really great, but The Family Plot specifically, like, just, that really got me.
Okay, and Kat?
So my absolute favorite is The Diviners by Leba Bray, which is set in the 1920s, ghosts, mediums. It's a wonderful book. It's very diverse. But the one I'm just devouring right now, I'm going to recommend it anyway, even though I'm not done, but I'm just tearing through the deep by Alma Katsu, which is about what if the Titanic was haunted. And it's going into this Irish legend of the, I don't know if I'm pronouncing this correctly, but Devasi, I am not sure. I was just reading it, so I wasn't doing the audiobook. But it's this revenge spirit who like takes children. It's an Irish legend of a woman at sea, similar to a Selkie, but it's a ghost. It's a spirit on the water. And these different, it's from different characters' perspective, and they all think they're being haunted in different ways for different reasons. And they do a seance on the ship, and then a character dies immediately after, and they all start to think one another's possessed because they're not showing a reflection. And I can't stop reading it. I absolutely love it. So highly recommend. She also wrote The Hunger, which is what if something weird and strange happened to the Donner Party? I mean, we all know it did anyway, but yeah. Right. But what if it was supernatural? I love her because she does the research. It's historical, but it's like, what if something supernatural happened? And I highly recommend The Deep.
Cool. Well, I want to thank all of you for being here. I know, sometimes it's difficult to gather people from different parts of the country and sometimes different parts of the world, and we all have things going on. So I appreciate it very much. And normally we would have an audience that would give you a hand, but I will do it myself. Thank you so much for being here, and forward to seeing everybody next year, in person. And thanks to our viewers for coming and listening to us talk about one of our favorite subjects at DragonCon Goes Virtual 2020. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Carol.
Thank you, Carol.
Thank you.